self-interest to adopt a moral lifestyle. But clearly, that is not always true. We all know situations in which self-interest runs smack dab in the face of morality. Moreover, if one is sufficiently powerful, like a Ferdinand Marcos, or a Papadoc Duvalier, or even a Donald Trump, one can pretty much ignore the dictates of conscience and live safely in self-indulgence. Historian Stuart C. Easton sums it up well when he writes, "There is no objective reason why man should be moral unless morality pays off in his social life or makes him feel good. There is no objective reason why man should do anything save for the pleasure it affords him." Acts of self-sacrifice become particularly imprudent on a naturalistic worldview. Why should you sacrifice your self-interest, and especially your life, for the sake of someone else? There can be no good reason for adopting such a self-negating course of action on a naturalistic worldview. Considered from the socio-biological point of view, such altruistic behavior is merely the result of evolutionary conditioning, which helps to perpetuate the species. A mother rushing into a burning house to save her children, or a soldier who gives his life to save his comrades, is like a fighter ant which sacrifices itself for the sake of the anthill. Common sense dictates that we should resist, if we can, the socio-biological pressures to such self-destructive activity and choose instead to act in our best self-interest. The philosopher of religion, John Hick, invites us to imagine an ant who is suddenly endowed with the insights of sociobiology and the freedom to make personal decisions. He writes, "Suppose him to be called upon to immolate himself for the sake of the anthill. He feels the powerful pressure of instinct pushing him toward this self-destruction. But he asks himself, why should he voluntarily carry out the suicidal program to which instinct prompts him? Why should he regard the future existence of a million other ants as more important to him than his own continued existence? Since all that he is and has and ever can have is his own present existence, surely, insofar as he is free from the domination of the blind force of instinct, he will opt for life, his own life." Now, why should we choose any differently? The absence of moral accountability from the philosophy of naturalism makes an ethic of compassion and self-sacrifice a hollow abstraction. R.C. Friedman, who is a philosopher at the University of Toronto, sums it up well. He says, "Without religion, the coherence of an ethic of compassion cannot be established. The principle of respect for persons and the principle of the survival of the fittest are mutually exclusive." We thus come to radically different perspectives on morality depending on whether or not God exists. If God exists, then there is a sound foundation for morality. If God does not exist, then it's plausible that there are no objective moral values, no objective moral duties, and no moral accountability. We are ultimately landed in nihilism. God is therefore vitally necessary to morality. Now, as I said, this is a conclusion that is accepted by a good many atheist philosophers, such as Nietzsche, Russell, and Sartre. Though the conclusion is a painful one, These thinkers believe that honesty compels them to face it squarely. The challenge facing the non-theist philosopher who continues to cling to objective moral values and duties after letting go of God is threefold. And let me see if I have this on the PowerPoint. No. Okay. Here's the threefold challenge for those who want to cling to moral values and duties objectively after letting go of God. First, they need to explain what is the basis of objective moral values on atheism. In particular, what is the basis for the intrinsic value of human beings? Second, they need to explain what is the source of moral duties on atheism. What makes certain acts objectively obligatory or forbidden if there is no moral lawgiver to command or prohibit them? And thirdly, they need to explain how on atheism ultimate moral accountability exists, or alternatively, why it is not necessary to morality. But the choice between theism and atheism need not be arbitrarily made. On the contrary, the very considerations that we have been discussing can constitute moral justification for the existence of God. And here we come to my third point. First, if we do think that objective moral values exist, then we shall be led logically to the conclusion that God exists. And could anything be more obvious than the objective reality of moral values that we experience in moral experience? There's no more reason to deny the objective reality of moral values than the objective reality of the physical world. The reasoning of Michael Roos, quoted earlier, is at worst a textbook example of the genetic fallacy. That is to say, trying to invalidate a position by showing how someone came to believe that position. And at best only proves that our subjective perception of objective moral values has evolved. But if moral values are gradually discovered, not invented, then such a gradual and fallible apprehension of the moral realm no more undermines the objective reality of that realm than our gradual, fallible apprehension of the physical world undermines the objectivity of that realm. The fact is that in moral experience, we do apprehend objective moral values. Actions like rape, torture, child abuse, and brutality aren't just socially unacceptable behavior. They're moral abominations. Even Michael Roos himself admits in another context that I quote, "The man who says that it is morally acceptable to rape little children is just as mistaken as the man who says 2 + 2 = 5. Notice that here Roos attributes to moral truths the same logical necessity that characterizes the truths of elementary arithmetic. By the same token, love, generosity, equality, and self-sacrifice are really good. People who fail to see this are just morally handicapped. And there's no reason to allow their impaired vision to call into question what we see clearly. Thus, the existence of objective moral values serves to demonstrate the existence of God. That's Roos's statement. Secondly, consider the nature of moral obligation. In moral experience, we find certain moral obligations or prohibitions imposed upon us. Speaking recently on a Canadian university campus, I noticed a poster put up by the Sexual Assault and Information Center. It read, "Sexual assault. No one has the right to abuse a child, woman, or man. Now, most of us would recognize that statement is evidently true. But the atheist can make no sense of a person's right not to be sexually abused by another person. The best answer to the question as to the source of moral obligation is that moral rightness or wrongness consists in agreement or disagreement with the will or commands of a holy, loving God. But then it follows that if you do believe that certain acts are really right or wrong, then you should believe in God. Finally, take the problem of moral accountability. Here we find a powerful practical argument for believing in God. According to the Harvard philosopher William James, practical arguments can be used only when theoretical arguments are insufficient to decide a question of urgent and pragmatic importance. But it seems obvious that a practical argument could also be used to back up or motivate acceptance of the conclusion of a sound theoretical argument. To believe, then, that God does not exist and that there is thus no moral accountability would be quite literally demoralizing. For then we'd have to accept that our moral choices are ultimately insignificant, since both our fate and that of the universe will be the same, regardless of what we do. By demoralization, I mean a deterioration of moral motivation. It's hard to do the right thing, especially when that means sacrificing your own self-interest, and to resist temptation to do wrong when desire is strong, and the belief that ultimately it does not matter what you choose or do is apt to sap one's moral strength and so undermine one's moral life. As Robert Adams observes, having to regard it as very likely that the history of the universe will not be good on the whole, no matter what one does, seems apt to induce a cynical sense of futility about the moral life, undermining one's moral resolve and one's interest in moral considerations. By contrast, there is nothing so likely to strengthen the moral life as the beliefs that one will be held accountable for one's actions and that one's choices really do make a difference in bringing about the good. Theism is thus a morally advantageous belief. And this, in the absence of any theoretical argument establishing atheism to be the case, provides practical grounds to believe in God and motivation to accept the conclusions of the two theoretical arguments that I just gave.